So I ran, and I looked out the side window, and I didn't see anything, and I opened the door, and I walked straight into the barrel of an assault rifle, straight into my chest. The officer was yelling, and at first I couldn't hear anything. It was almost like a flashbang had gone off, but I think my nervous system had just deregulated. Then I heard him yelling, "I will shoot you dead, boy!" I've talked a lot about the 19 years that I spent in prison, about going in when I was young and lost and scared and hopeless and having no idea what to do next. I've talked about finding the teachers and the friends and the opportunities that allowed me to become the person I am today. I've talked about getting out of prison with only an hour and a half's notice because the governor had granted me a conditional pardon, and once again being lost and confused because I felt like an 18-year-old in a late 30s body trying to navigate this alien COVID world and not knowing what to do next. I've also talked about some of the things that I've done or accomplished in the last 4 years. But today, in preparation for the release of my book, The Best Part of Prison, which comes out March 10th of 2026, I want to talk about the day I thought my life was over and the fact that when I woke up that morning, I probably would have given anything for my life to actually be over. Because for months, I had been strung out on cocaine, I'd been drinking myself to sleep every night, staying up for days at a time, and when I finally got to sleep and woke up in the morning, I'd have beer with breakfast. Did everything I could to numb that pain. I felt like there was this monster chasing me. And I could never see what it was, but I felt like if I stopped long enough to look, that it would devour me, it would destroy me. So I stayed running, I stayed high, I stayed doing everything I could to distract myself, to not feel the pain, not feel the misery, not feel the hopelessness, not feel the shame. So that morning when I woke up, I remember thinking like, God, I have to do this again. Now, I went to go see an old girlfriend of mine because I had just committed the robbery, I had just committed the shooting, and there was a newspaper article explaining who I was, saying so-and-so with this hair and this outfit and this truck and this whatever, so everybody knew it was me. Everybody in my life knew I committed a shooting. So she called me, she said, "Jesse, what the F did you do? My mom talked to me this morning, like, what are you doing?" So the first thing I did was try to figure out our plan. So one of my co-defendants and I started packing stuff in the car, and we were going to take off and drive out west. We thought we would just get away, that nobody would chase us. We'd go see my sister in Colorado or go to California, and he was from El Salvador, and he swore he could steal a sailboat, and we'd sail down to see his family in El Salvador, and he'd introduce me to his sister, all these crazy things. But I went to see that girlfriend, or that old girlfriend. We had broken up at that point. She was dating somebody else, but she was like my high school flame. I went there, and I remember she was crying, and I was like, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Jesse, you're going to go to prison." I remember thinking, like, I'm not going to prison. What do you, like, I have to worry about these people killing me, but, like, I'm not going to prison. You must be out of your mind. But it slowly started to seep in. When I saw how panicked, how scared she was, I started to wonder, like, am I going to go to prison? Like, is that actually possible? Like, how would they find me? How would this happen? I was confused and I didn't understand. But I came back to my co-defendant's house where we were all at, and I went in the bathroom to do a line of coke. Because back in the day, when we first started, we would put giant bags of Coke all in bowls and share it with everybody and spread it out on the table, and at this point, we were hoarding it. So I was going in the bathroom so nobody would see, so I didn't have to share. I went in the bathroom, I used the toilet, and then I pulled out a baggie, and I was shaking so bad that when I tried to do a bump, I dropped the whole bag in the toilet, full of piss. And immediately reached down and grabbed it, like I wasn't gonna let that go, and I figured I could cook it up and that, piss wouldn't kill me if I cooked it up. But because of that, I didn't get that bump, I wasn't able to stay awake. So I walked back out in the living room, I took a giant swig of vodka from the Aristocrat bottle, I sat down for a second and immediately fell asleep. And when I woke up, heard one of my co-defendants yelling in Spanish, "La policía está afuera, la policía está afuera, corre!" Like, the police are outside, run! So I remember seeing one of my other co-defendants out of the corner of my eye, we both ran to the back room where we kept the rifles and the guns. We both picked up a rifle, and we looked at each other, and I just remember seeing that look of fear in his eyes, and I know he saw that same look in my eyes. I was terrified. So we looked at each other for a second, almost like frozen, and we just threw the guns down, and he ran out the back, and I tried to be smart. I tried to run upstairs, because it was an over-under duplex, and we were downstairs. So in my mind, I was like, well, if I come out the upper entrance, they'll think I'm from up there, like they won't be able to arrest me. So I ran, and I looked out the side window, and I didn't see anything, and I opened the door, and I walked straight into the barrel of an assault rifle, straight into my chest. The officer was yelling, and at first I couldn't hear anything. It was almost like a flashbang had gone off, but I think my nervous system had just deregulated. Then I heard him yelling, "I will shoot you dead, boy!" And I put my hands over my head, and I remember having the thought, like, if he shot me, I wouldn't have to worry about any of this. Like, I wouldn't have to keep running. It would be over. Then he told me to walk backwards down the steps. And this was a tall thing from the second floor, and there was ice all over it, and so I started walking. I took one step and then another, and then I slipped and waved my hand, and I had that same thought. I remember thinking, if I slip and fall, I'm gonna break my neck. Like, I don't have to keep running. Like, this won't keep hurting. But I didn't. I made it to the bottom. I slipped one more time, waved my hands, got to the bottom, and they grabbed my arms and they constrained me and asked me what I had and ran my pockets, and they found that wet bag of cocaine, and they found the money in my wallet, and they found the knife that was on my belt. They missed the cigarette pack full of bullets, which was interesting later, but they took my belt, they just took all my stuff, and then they stuck me in the back of a squad car. I remember it felt like a bad movie because the lights were flashing. I don't think the sirens were on, but you'd see neighbors peeking out of their windows or sitting on their porch and just staring at us. And like we were the end of the bad movie. Like we were done. Our lives were over. And at the same time that it felt like my life was over, there was a huge sense of relief. Like the handcuffs going around my wrist almost made it feel like it was going to be okay. Because I wouldn't have to keep running. I wouldn't have to keep snorting and drinking and smoking, and like it would just be over. Somehow like the credits would roll and I was done. They took us to the police station. I remember walking in and sitting at this large table, and I had a trench coat and I had my handcuffs still on, and the first detective walked in and he did this good cop, bad cop thing. Like, hey, Jesse, I know this wasn't your idea. I know you got sucked into something. We can make this right. Like, we can make all this go away. And I remember just looking at him being like, bro, I know I'm like strung out and dumb, but like I'm not that dumb. Then when I didn't cooperate, he kind of raised his voice and said, this isn't going to go well for you. And he just kind of went back and forth. And yeah, I said, I'm not interested. So I sat there, he left, and I'm sitting there kind of stewing. And then I remember like, wait, I have a cigarette pack full of bullets in my pocket. Like, I wonder if I should get rid of those. So I dig down and figure out how to get down to the lining of my jacket, and I get it, and I walk to the other side of the table, and so right in front of the door when he walked in, it was just square right on the edge of the table. So I sat back down, and when the new detective came in, he looked at the cigarettes, and he looked at me, and went over there and opened it up, and just like basically cussed under his breath, and I was like, yeah, I figured you'd want those, and he was not very happy, as you can imagine. But what I remember about this guy is, unlike the first officer who was like, trying to trick me and trying to get me to cooperate, this one was very clear. He said, that first detective needs your cooperation. Like, he needs to build a case. I don't need anything. I got you dead to rights for the shooting. Like, if you want to help yourself, I'll listen. Otherwise, I'll go home to dinner with my wife. And I just remember that feeling true, like him feeling genuine. And in a way, after everything that had happened, after being roughed up and stuck in the police car and handcuffed, I remember being thankful to just be treated like a human being. And I remember thinking, well, I'm not going to make a statement. Like, my dad raised me. You don't make statements. You don't snitch. But what I said, because I refused to sign the statement thing, was, hey, not everything is as it seems. Because in the robbery, what the first detective was investigating, we were completely in the wrong. We went and broke into somebody's home. We thought it was empty, but that doesn't mean it's okay. Like, just because we thought it was empty doesn't mean it was, and we terrorized someone. We terrorized the person that was there. We terrorized the owners of the home to come home to a burglarized home. It was just in no way acceptable. And I knew that. I hated myself for that. In the shooting, I felt like I just wanted to explain that I hadn't just gone out and shot a random person. That these two guys had been at my buddy's girlfriend's house and she had called us crying because they wouldn't leave and because they were threatening her. And that I had tried to play Billy Badass and that I wanted them to know that they were going to leave or else, and they threatened me and I threatened them. And when we met, I had that moment of clarity, like, wait, what am I'm going to die, or they're going to die, or somebody's going to die. So I left and they chased me. And I remember being angry and being scared and being lost. And then when I saw the passenger reach over like he was grabbing something, I just knew he was going for a gun. So I pulled out my gun and I squeezed the trigger until it stopped clicking. I don't know if he was going for a gun. I know they had a gun in the vehicle, but he could have been grabbing a snack, or he could have been grabbing a phone. He could have been grabbing anything. But in that state I was in, I was terrified and I was going to do anything to stay alive. So for that reason, I didn't tell the officer any of that, but I wanted him to know I didn't just shoot some random person. Like, this was for a reason. So I said, not everything is as it seems. And I remember he just kind of said, yeah, I kind of figured that. I later found out in the jail that the people in the jail knew those guys very well and they knew their stories. So I figured this officer probably did too. But I remember thinking, okay, like, cool. Like, this guy wants to like build a case against me, but he didn't have one. This guy has me for the shooting, but like he knows it's complicated. Like, cool. So they loaded me back into a police car, took me to the jail. I went through this roll-up door. It looked like some weird bat cave, but then you get in there and it's just a jail. It's not like an exciting one. Went in there and they fingerprinted me, and I was so excited to like get fingerprints on ink, or not excited, but like that's what I was expecting. That when it was just a flat screen and it was all digital, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, but what about the thing? What about like the holding the board? No, you just take a picture. My picture did end up in the Daily Progress, the local newspaper, which was not my highest moment, but They then locked me in a cell. And I remember I was sitting in that cell and I still was full of adrenaline. I mean, I just had an assault rifle pointed at my chest and somebody threatening they were going to shoot me. And so I sat there and I tried to count the bricks because I still couldn't stop myself. Like, I still couldn't stop running from whatever was going on in my head. Then I looked around and I could see people in some of the other cells. These were like big open plexiglass doors. And I remember thinking, like, where are my co-defendants? Where are the people that I committed my crimes with? And then it was 20 minutes, and then 40 minutes, and then an hour, and then the first one came in. I was like, that's weird. They took them a long time to get here. And it was 30 minutes, and then 40 minutes, and another hour, and another one came in. And then another hour, and the last guy came. And that was when I realized, unlike me, they had all given statements. So, like, they had stayed in the police station to give statements and sign paperwork and let them know what had happened. And at the time, I couldn't imagine that. Because when we used to run around, we used to always say we were como hermanos, like we were like brothers. And I couldn't imagine setting up my brother or telling on my brother. Because again, my dad had raised me that way. Like, you don't open your mouth, you don't say nothing, you keep your mouth shut, this is what you do. And so that's what I was expecting. That's what I expected them to do. When I found out they'd given statements, or when they later testified against me, I just remember being like, damn, like, I didn't know we were there. And it's crazy because I actually pleaded guilty, so it was the whole story. But that day, I remember going to sleep and then only waking up long enough to eat the tray that they put on the door and going back to sleep and waking up to eat the tray and going to the bathroom and going back to sleep. And it was days of that, days of just like sleeping and eating and the most basic human components. And I felt just done, like my life was over. But I also did feel that sense of relief that I didn't have to find a way to kill the pain, that it was done. Like I said, it felt like the credits were gonna roll and I wouldn't have to keep running. But I look back on that day, and as much as I felt like my life was over, I can recognize the relief I felt, like the weight off my shoulders of getting high and running and owing money and doing this, and the fact that, in a way, it liberated me. Now, I think about being locked up in prison, but being locked up in addiction, locked up in chasing that next high, locked up in chasing that whatever on the street was miserable. Like, that was the most miserable I've ever been. So, in a way, it freed me. And yeah, I was still in a cell, and then I was in a block, and then I was in another block, but I was free. And it took time to really recognize that and really feel that. But for the first time, even though my body was confined, my mind, my spirit, my emotions were free. I was able to become the person I am now. I was able to heal. I was able to be accountable. I was able to plead guilty. I was able to do all the things I needed to do to move forward. And while I was getting high out on the streets and running and gunning, and I couldn't do that. I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to take that first step. So in a weird way, the day that they locked me up, the day they stuck those handcuffs on my wrist, and they threw me in a patrol car and then threw me in a cell, was the first day of freedom for me. The first day of beginning to realize that I didn't have to keep living like I've been living. So the day I thought my life was over was actually the beginning of a much better chapter of my life.